We negate. Our first contention concerns bringing internet to the developing world. Currently, U.S. tech giants are spreading internet to poor countries. PISA of the Center for Global Development in 2019 explains that over the past decade, the percentage of those living with internet access in low-income countries has expanded from 6% to nearly 33%, driven by efforts by tech giants like Facebook and Google. However, the lack of antitrust enforcement is key to this continued progress. The Economist in 2014 explains that profits that monopolies bring allow bold, long-term plans and ambitious research projects that firms locked in competition can't dream of. In fact, Levine of Harvard in 2014 furthers that right now, tech companies have enough financial resources to not only keep stakeholders satisfied, but also spend on capturing new users in poor countries, which could generate profits in the future. As such, Ward of Futurism in 2017 concludes that a shift in the antitrust regulation could ultimately pose an existential threat to Silicon Valley, shifting their entire business model. The impact is alleviating poverty. Internet access spreads information in terms of health and social services, education, and employment opportunities. As such, Taleb Quantum Run in 2018 quantifies that if developing countries reach internet penetration levels equal to the developed world, it would pull 160 million people out of poverty. Contention 2 is preserving America's innovation pipeline. Currently, America's tech giants and startups work in tandem to create the world's leading market for innovation. Hu of the Washington Post in 2018 concludes that the U.S. remains the undisputed global leader in science and technology, topping the list in high-tech production. This shows no signs of slowing down. According to the NBCEA, venture capital investment into U.S.-based startups reached its highest point in history throughout 2018. And as a result, Atkinson of UNC in 2017 writes that over the past 10 years, the number of technology startups have increased in the United States by 47%. Enforcing antitrust regulations on tech giants would erode the foundation of American innovation. This begins with a slowdown in acquisitions. Because the Clayton Antitrust Act specifically bars mergers and acquisitions, Bhargava of UPenn in 2019 writes that enforcing antitrust regulation, there would have to be rules prohibiting big companies from acquiring small firms. Unfortunately, Bhargava furthers that for many startups, the initial investment they get from venture capitalists is given with the expectation that they will be bought out by a Facebook or a Google for a profitable exit from the investor. As such, Zdanov of Penn State in 2017 reveals that the existence of a wave of mergers and acquisitions increases the probability of a venture capital investing wave by 19%. Venture capital gives startups the requisite resources and expertise to innovate. Bertoni of the Journal of Finance in 2010 quantifies that the average venture capital-backed firm is 5.3 times more innovative. However, not only would antitrust law doom startup activity, it would also prevent tech giants from bringing innovation to consumers. Day of Columbia in 2017 writes that firms are most innovative when they are least exposed to liability. Unfortunately, he finds that historically, antitrust enforcement has so substantially raised the risk of liability that tech advancement has suffered. Sutton of BU in 2019 furthers that big companies uniquely have the resources to scale products from small companies to the market and consumers. Overall, Asatanoff of Oregon in 2012 finds that anti-takeover laws, those that prevent acquisitions, lead to a 19% decrease in patenting even 4 years after the law is enacted. The impact is halting current progress. Tech innovation helps businesses expand, become more efficient, and drive down the prices of goods, ultimately improving the quality of life of all Americans. Thus, Davis of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce in 2014 quantifies that approximately 50% of U.S. annual GDP growth is attributed to increases in innovation. Nordhaus of Yale in 2018 furthers that 96% of the gains from technology go to consumers rather than producers, meaning that innovation-led growth will help the poorest Americans. Ultimately, Leiden of Brookings concludes that the most important factor in terms of driving improvement in living standards has been and will continue to be the rate of technological advance. Let's begin.
We're all ready, correct? All right. When firms compete with another, consumers get the best possible prices, quantity, and quality of goods and services. Antitrust laws encourage companies to compete so that both consumers and businesses benefit. Because we believe competition is key, we are proud to affirm resolve. The United States federal government should enforce antitrust regulations on technology giants. Our sole contention is saving startups. Tech giants stifle startups at both stages of development. The first stage is launch. Cable of the Guardian last year writes, by tying in users through the features they offer, tech giants leave entrepreneurs feeling like they can't start up at all. The nature of the tech sector amplifies this. As Lancetti of the Harvard Business Review in 2017 explains, the sector is naturally prone to monopolies so that each new app makes its platform more valuable, creating a network effect that creates a more daunting barrier for entry of new players. The second stage is expansion. Monopolies have made it impossible for young firms to survive. The Economist in 2018 explains that tech giants are ruthless about indiscriminately buying up or cloning emerging competitors. Schetzer of the Stigler Center explains in 2018 that startups have effectively no chance of competing against tech giants and must decide, sell or get crushed. The Big Five have made over 400 acquisitions in the last decade with no challenge from antitrust authorities. Problematically, Tom of CBS finds in 2016 that acquisitions that lead to monopolies increase price by up to 50% with no corresponding increase in the quality of the goods being sold. If startups refuse to sell, they find themselves facing an uneven playing field. Tech giants can clone startup features and use their vast reach to completely undercut growth. Thus, The Economist concludes in 2018 that venture capitalists try to dodge spaces where tech giants might step in the future. Ultimately, Solanka crystallizes that big tech has succeeded and new business launches are at a 30-year low. Enforcing antitrust regulations resolve these issues, as Real View Chicago finds that antitrust enforcement protects and promotes competition. When businesses must compete, they offer better products and services. Burke of the Harvard Business Review in 2013 furthers that competition is in the early stages, increases firms' long-term survival prospects, challenging environments that cause startups to be focused on consumer needs and lowering costs. There are two specific sectors that are currently being decimated as a result of these monopolies. The first is the healthcare industry. As Lancetti writes in 2017, digital connectivity has sped up monopolization. Reliant on cloud services provided by tech giants, hub firms are likely to emerge next in healthcare. Shen of The Verge this year confirms from Amazon and Apple opening clinics to acquiring healthcare startups, tech giants spent 2018 moving into healthcare. This is disastrous for drug innovation. As Vicky of Forbes last year explains, large corporations have established business models, so innovating is more difficult because products must align with them. The Small Business Administration confirms startups drive innovation 16 times faster than larger companies, and Elsevier quantifies that 64% of new medication originated from startups. This saves lives around the world, as Lichtenberg of the NPER quantifies that across the globe, new medical technology has been responsible for a 73% increase in life expectancy. Second is the seed industry. Monsanto is a tech giant controlling the seed market, as Phil Plott in 2012 from Mother Jones explains. That Monsanto controls up to 98% of GMO soybeans, corn, and cotton in the U.S. As a result, the Miami Times in 2013 found the biotech giant has more than tripled prices of crops. These increasing costs cut farmers off from any benefits of new technology and destroy startups. As Phil Plott continues, that as a result of Monsanto's monopoly, shares owned by local companies fell by 50%. In light of this anti-competitiveness, the World Bank reports that food prices are the highest in 20 years. Prices rose 15% in 4 months, throwing 44 million into poverty. Antitrust enforcement is the solution, as Busso of the University of Maryland in 2015 confirms that if competition increases 1%, food prices drop 0.06%. It is for these reasons that Phil Plott concludes the seed market requires antitrust enforcement. Yeah, I'm surviving.
Okay. Is everybody ready?
Yeah.
So explain to me, from your perspective, why an agro-business like Monsanto is a technology giant.
Because they are a biotech firm, so they use so they are technology-based, and they are formulating their business models around the use of technology. So they use
technology to make seeds, right? That's your reason?
No, that's not the reason. They make the technology that makes the seeds.
So they make the technology that makes the seeds, but they don't sell that technology or provide that technology to any consumers, right?
They do sell that technology. They sell that. They say
seeds.
No.
Well, your whole impact is about selling seeds.
Yeah, no, that's part of it. But another part of it is that they sell. They do sell the.
They sell technology to small farmers. That's what your argument is?
That's not my argument. But okay.
So then why is it a tech company?
They're a tech company because their business model is formulated around the production of biotechnology.
No, their business model uses technology to create agriculture products like seeds. So my question then is, by your definition, isn't every big company in the world right now a technology company?
No,
because it uses technology to make its products.
Because other companies don't necessarily create technology.
Well,
for example, like law firms, they use computers, but they don't make computers.
Well, that's not what I'm talking about. Well, I would argue that what a tech company is a company that provides technology or technology services to consumers.
I'll disagree with that. Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Okay. So if antitrust is increasing liability now, as per your own evidence, why?
No, it's not.
No, your evidence indicates that antitrust is currently a liability for VCs.
No, that's the opposite of what we're saying.
No, your evidence very clearly indicates, as per your own constructor.
Why would we read that on the?
I don't know. I'm asking.
Well, what's actually happening is that you misunderstood the argument. I can explain it right now. What's happening right now is that venture capitalists see a unregulated market as much better in terms of investing in small businesses, because in an unregulated market, small companies are specialized in trying to sell particular pieces of software to companies instead of saying, I want to be the next Facebook, which is much more risky for an investor than a company that just wants to be bought out, and that gets a return on investment for the investor.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So you say that competition will increase in your world. Who is competing with Facebook and Google in your world?
What, competing with Facebook? There's a ton of social media, startups that can put it.
Okay, so it's startups.
Our argument is about startups.
Okay, so how much does Facebook need to lose its market share when right now it's at 80% for small startups to be able to compete with the biggest company in the world?
I can't give you an exact number of the percentage of money they need to use.
Can you give me a ballpark? Because I think that even if Facebook is made a little smaller,
that's
startups
kind of a
won't be able to
ridiculous
compete
question.
with the biggest company.
You can't ask me to
I was going to curse there, but I'm sorry. The biggest company in the world. So that's what I'm saying here. So what are you saying?
I'm confused as to what you're saying, because I think it's a ridiculous burden to ask me to provide you a number of how much money they have to lose in order for other companies.
I'm not asking for a specific number, because obviously that's unreasonable. I agree. What I'm saying is that even if you make Facebook a little bit smaller, startups are infinitesimally smaller and have no actual probability of getting bigger.
It's not a question of whether or not the company is smaller, it's whether or not it's possible for them to be competitive.
Is everybody ready? Let's go to my opponent's case. The first thing they say is that competition is generally a good thing. We would say that this competition is occurring in the status quo. What Manju 17 of the New York Times explains is that each of the big five tech giants are actively competing with each other to launch into new areas of business. For example, Google Maps and Apple Maps. This is going to be incredibly important because there still is competition on the market, and this is having benefits for consumers in the status quo. Strain 18 of Bloomberg finds and concludes that big tech has been the best possible thing to happen to American consumers because they've increased innovation and they've decreased prices overall. So what that means is in the status quo, big tech competes against big tech, and that is still a fair way to go in this round. Let's go to their first contention where they discuss startups. So the first thing they talk about is at the launch period. People don't think their ideas can actually get to the market, so they don't actually start new businesses. But no, here's the issue. As Danny points out in Crossfire, they don't really have an answer to this. Just because we influence antitrust does not mean that Facebook and a very small startup become the same size and are able to compete. This is why the status quo is uniquely more efficient, because small startups can specialize in tech services that will be bought out by Google and Facebook, which makes investors a lot more likely to invest in them because it is less risky. In their world, when every company, as an analogy, is trying to make the next car, there's so much more risk for that to happen. But if everyone is making a piece of the car, that is much more efficient and much more likely to get outside investment. But then, their second warrant here talks about expansion. They say these companies are getting crushed in killer acquisitions. But according to Mandel 11, specific to the technology sector, mergers and acquisitions are a very good thing because it is very risky for a tech firm to get anywhere in the market without venture capital. And the only way they get venture capital is if they can be bought out. Remember, even if you vote for them, there's not just going to be complete competition among startups and Facebooks. At that point, they're not going to win the argument. But then, they give two general cards here about why monopolies are bad. First, they say consolidation increases prices by 50%, not specific to the tech sector. Here's what is. Rozup 18 explains that there are super low prices for all of the sectors that tech is involved in. Social media has always been free, and Amazon has been decreasing prices. We attribute this to A, the fact that they're able to compete in the status quo and their general size and investment into new innovation, and B, the fact that startups can still thrive too because they get that outside investment. Second, they say there's a 30-year low in new businesses. That is true of mom and pop shops. It is not true of technology startups. Our Atkinson evidence tells you that there is a 47% increase in the new businesses in the tech industry over the past 10 years, coinciding with the rise of tech giants, which means that the proof is in the pudding, because the WHO 18 evidence in our case tells you that the US remains the world leader in innovation. We are producing the most high-tech products in the world. If you want to know which side you should vote for what you know is happening in the real world. But then, on their impacts is all about innovation. But innovation is increasing right now in the status quo. Pethokoukis in 2019 finds that we are at the highest rate of multi-factor productivity for since World War II. Multi-factor productivity is a function of innovation's impact onto the economic growth. And he finds that businesses are on the verge of capitalizing on new innovation, proving that the innovation now is a good thing. Their first link impact is about the healthcare industry. But again, if we prove that startups and big tech are better off in our world, we win the link into the healthcare industry. But second, according to Zoffer in 2019, big tech firms can only afford to go into risky areas like AI and healthcare, for example, because they have so much profits and market share. If you get rid of that, they're going to focus on short-term innovations, not booming innovations like healthcare. Second, they talk about GMOs. We would say Monsanto is not a tech company. They sell seeds and they use tech to produce the seeds. We're not saying like a pizza uses an oven to get pizza. Pizza's not a tech company, like a pizza shop. But second, Dewey 19 finds that it's already happening in the status quo. The Justice Department investigated Monsanto's recent merger with Bayer, and they concluded that, and they actually enforced antitrust by forcing Bayer to sell a bunch of their R&D projects and a bunch of their seeds to a third-party company. So it's already happening. Clearly, it's not what the topic is about.
It's going to start at the top of the app flow. Is everyone good? Okay. His first response tells you that big technology is competing with big technology. This is a false characteristic because Amazon is not competing with Google in the distribution sector. Amazon has a huge monopoly of the distribution sector. Google is not competing. Also, Apple is not competing with, say, Amazon in phones. What this means is that each big tech giant is consolidating an entire market and monopolizing that market, and then in turn expanding to other markets. Now let's go into their responses on our first warrant about the launch. They tell you that these mom and pop shops and these startups aren't going to be able to compete, and they need to specialize to make a good car in the whole. But recognize, if you want to look to cars, let's analyze what General Motors did in 2005. General Motors bought out a bunch of electric car companies and waited to delay the production of these electric cars until 2012. What this empirically means is that large tech corporations buy out innovative products and delay the market until it's profitable for them to release them. That is ultimately why tons of startups are at a 30-year low. That's our Salone evidence. But now let's go into our second warrant about expansion. He reads one piece of evidence from Mandel, which tells you that because venture capitalists want to get bought out, venture capital goes away if you affirm the resolution. Our economist evidence literally responds to this. It's in our case. We indicate that venture capitalists actually don't want tech startups, don't like tech giants, because they want to grow the business. For example, Uber was offered to be bought thousands and thousands of times, but they didn't. So the venture capitalist investors who invested in Uber now make billions of dollars because they never got bought out. Now let's go to their second response. He tells you that our 50% card is not specific to the tech sector. Exactly. For example, Amazon is not just monopolizing the tech sector, they just bought Whole Foods a couple months ago. What this empirically means is that we need to look to the entire sector, and big tech giants are monopolizing the entire sector. That's why there's a 50% reduction in the quality of goods without anything benefiting the consumers. Now at the bottom of this second warrant, he tells you that the 30-year low is just about mom and pop shops. Again, we need to look at the entire market because Amazon and these corporations are consolidating mom and pop shops. But then he tells you the proof is in the pudding. No, it's not actually in the proof. The status quo obviously isn't innovating. He tells you that we've been on the, quote, verge of innovation for a long time. We've been on the verge of innovation for like decades. This is what like big tech giants do, and then they only release it when it's profitable. The empirical example is cars. Now let's go to our first impact where we talk about healthcare. He talks about productivity, he cites the Zoffer evidence, but this doesn't make any sense because his warrant is risk. Even if you split up Microsoft, they're still going to make large sums of money. For example, in the 1980s, Microsoft was hit with litigation and their value actually increased directly after. What this empirically means is that there is no risk because if you split up a monopoly, they still make huge sums of money. But then on the second impact about the seed industry, he makes this really weird and silly analogy about the pizza. A biotech firm, if you literally on Monsanto's Wikipedia, it said it's a, quote, biotech firm. But even more so, they are using technology in seeds and they're also expanding their market. The term tech giant is a term of art. Empirically, Monsanto controls 98% of the market share. They're a tech giant. The last time they hiked up prices, 44 million people got pushed into poverty. That's empirically a bad thing. Now let's go into their side of the case. Their first contention talks about the internet. The Verge explains that because, for example, even if you break up a monopoly, it is still super profitable. Empirically, as I said earlier, Microsoft was broken up, but their sums and revenue still increased. That is ultimately the reason as to why you can still expand the internet even if you affirm the resolution. But then let's go into their impact evidence. Two problems here. One, the impact evidence, the study they cite about the internet being so good was paid and bought and subsidized or like bought by Facebook, and Facebook is the one doing these internet adventures. That's why you can turn the other because Inman explains that these large tech corporations are going into developing nations and destroying innovative startups in the local grassroots movements. That's why, for example, in India and Africa, Uber is just destroying local economies by taxis, and their workers and their drivers aren't even making any monies. But then on the second contention about innovation, you can actually turn it because Hopkins of the Business Review empirically proves that mergers and acquisitions eviscerates innovation. He explains that giants acquire firms that are compatible with their service and double down on what they already produce. That's why it's empirically verified. In his analysis of over 400 firms in 5 years, he finds that innovation decreases by more than 20% for the firm being merged and 16% for the market as a whole. But even more so, the Pierce evidence from case shows that mergers and acquisitions directly hurt consumers because they raise prices by 50%. Even if startups innovate with the goal of being bought out, there are far fewer startups in their world. That's why you affirm. I'm ready whenever you are.
We're going to take prep time.
All right. We'll run a little prep. You can have the first question, Cindy.
Everyone's good? So, you make the response that Microsoft and these tech giants will still be super profitable then, if you affirm.
That's why that.
Okay. So at that point, when they're super profitable, they still control huge amounts of data. How are startups supposed to compete with them?
The
on the same
difference,
level?
no. It's not about competition. It's about how much revenue they make, right? I made the argument that, for example, when Microsoft was split up in the 1980s, their revenue stayed the same. Their growth slowed by a little. Empirically, what we're saying is when you split up, if I can finish, if you split up Microsoft, the startups have more access to capital, and also if you affirm the resolution, Microsoft can't buy these smaller startups, so that's another independent.
Wait, but my question is, even if they can't buy the startups, right, they still have huge amounts of profits, huge amounts of revenue coming from their big
But they can't disproportionately use their revenue to buy up and consolidate the market.
Right?
We spent a minute on this though,
No.
so I'll let you finish and then I'll take a question.
Because you're not responding to my question, right?
I did.
If they're still super profitable, they still have large platforms. Small startups can't compete. They don't have those platforms if you vote for the affirmative.
Okay, so let's talk about your argument on like
Okay.
the Mandela evidence, right?
Yes. This
Okay, so why should we only look at evidence to the tech sector if tech giants are expanding across the entire economy?
Wait, say that again?
Why should we only look at evidence specific to the tech sector if these tech giants, per the resolution, are expanding across the entire economy and market?
Yeah, because the tech sector is where they are having the most footprint on smaller firms.
That's
right?
just not true.
At
Why did
least-
Amazon buy Whole Foods?
Okay, well, if you want to look to that specific example, the price of Whole Foods goods has not increased, right? So,
Wait, what?
like, your whole point with that argument is like, I'm wrong that tech services are priced cheaper because of tech giants?
No. My whole point of
Amazon
that
bought
argument
Whole
is that tech giants are expanding organically into a bunch of
Sure.
different arguments
The
and
problem
a bunch
with
of
that-
different
the problem with that
sectors.
is like, sure, that's fine, but in all of those other sectors, whether it's like airplane industry, healthcare industry, there's already huge giants there. So the best.
Yeah,
wait,
the Amazon,
can I finish?
Google, Facebook.
Can I
Go
finish?
ahead.
So these big tech firms, sure, they're starting to get involved in there, but the area they're most involved in and have the biggest footprint in is technology.
Yeah, but
and
so
those startups have increased.
Your responses to our evidence, you try to indict our evidence by saying, oh, it's not specific to tech startups. That's what I'm attacking, right? It shouldn't be specific to tech startups.
I totally understand that.
Okay,
Sure,
great.
but
You
I'm
can have a
saying
question.
But let me just quickly repeat what I said. All those
You
other
don't need- I heard
industries
it
have
first.
other giants in it, but the tech industry
Sure.
doesn't.
Just go
Those
ahead.
startups have
You
increased.
can have a question.
On your impact about Monsanto, you say the last time they raised prices, 44 million people went into poverty. Is that globally?
Yeah.
Okay, so What is stopping Monsanto from raising
Okay,
prices in
the reason
Africa?
that they're able to control prices globally is because they have a domestic monopoly. As soon as
That
you...
is not true. They have monopolies in
Sandy,
other
you can't just say
countries.
it's not true if you don't like my argument, right?
Well,
The
I have
reason-
evidence too. It's
Okay.
ridiculous.
You
to
didn't
say
read it in
that-
rebuttal, though.
That's because I didn't understand that your impact was about the globe, right? Like
What?
maybe if your argument against the U.S., I wouldn't say this.
That's,
But
okay,
can't
you should have
control their
understood the argument when
operations.
Isaac read it. I understand he was coughing a lot, but like...
Hey, that's not nice.
It's okay.
More prep time.
So, the business review concepts. That's fine.
We'll take a little more.
Oh.
So it'll be our case and their case going.
How much prep do you have left?
No prep. Let's go. Okay. Start on our first contention. They redetermined, but they tell you the companies are still profitable, so they non-unique their own term. The place your voting process is our second contention about preserving innovation and hurting small businesses. The only response they make to this in rebuttal is that it's a turn to the 20% increase in prices because mergers and acquisitions are bad as a whole on the economy. But we're saying that the tech sector specifically is very different because it works in a pipeline. Not everyone's trying to make one big product. They're trying to make specialized parts of product to sell to a bigger company like Facebook or Google. That's the nuance that they miss in the case. The Vargava evidence tells you that venture capitalists only invest in small businesses in the tech sector right now for the potential of a buyout. And the reason why is really simple. When in their world, every company is trying to be the next Google. When every company is trying to be the next Google, it's much more risky for an investor to spend a lot of money because there's a much lower probability they're actually going to get a return on investment than a specialized product. That's why we tell you that in our case, the startups are thriving right now at a rate of 47% higher than they were 10 years ago. They respond to this analysis by saying that there's like a 20 or 40-year low or whatever on the entire economy. But Sandeep's nuance here is the idea that there are other giants in other industries of the economy that are controlling and that are then like that those price increases can be contributed to. So we should only look to the tech sector because that's where the tech giants are actually leading to impacts. At the end of the round, we do the weighing at the SANOP evidence, which tells you that on their world you see a 19% lower rate of innovation, leading to the Latin evidence, which tells you specifically that the technological advance that we're seeing in the status quo, which is our world, is the most important factor in driving living standards in the United States. The most important factor, that's the weighing in the round. Let's go to their case where they talk about competition. First of all, they make a huge mistake when they say that these companies are going to be the exactly same amount of profitability and the exact same size in both worlds. That means because market share is a zero-sum game, the companies have as much money in both worlds. Small companies have no region to go into because market share is a zero-sum game. Specifically, when you go down to Monsanto, our argument here is very simple: that like not every company that uses tech to produce seeds is a biotech company or is a technology giant. That's why all the literature on the topic is about like Facebook, Amazon, Google. It's clearly not what the topic is about. Don't let them go around with this absurd argument.
All right, we'll run it, Brad. We have a minute 45. So that's about all our prep used.
Yeah. Alright. Are we all ready? Okay. We'll start on our arguments. The first thing that Danny tells you in his summary is that we say that companies are the same size. They're the same size. They have this. Shree's argument was that they have the same amount of money but less market share. That argument, that's the argument. It's not about the size of the company, but rather the market share that the company has. That is what precludes competition. It's not about how much capital they have, but rather about their size. At that point, you can drop down to our Monsanto argument. The argument right now is that Monsanto currently controls 98% of the current market share. That means that they have a functional monopoly over the industry that is currently driving up prices of seeds. They say that Monsanto is not a technology company. It literally is a biotech firm. They make this one argument about how they don't actually produce like technology. Neither does Facebook. Facebook doesn't actually sell technology. They sell advertising, advertisement, which ultimately means that they can still be classified as a tech giant because they use technology as as their main source of revenue. That ultimately means that they are tech giant. That ultimately means we get a very clean internal linkage to our impact, which implicates that the entirety of the developing world relies upon low prices in order to purchase their seeds and in order for them to plant these seeds and thus make food at lower prices. That lower priced food then stops things like starvation in developing countries. That ultimately is a very clean impact that Danny does not touch in his summary. At that point, you can move on to their side. First of all, you can extend our evidence, which indicates that companies retool possibly competitive startups to make it align with their previously developed business plans. That's ultimately the reasoning as to why the innovations that are created are not necessarily innovative. They simply align with what companies have been doing. Also recognize that you can extend our economist evidence that Danny very clearly does not answer. Our evidence indicates that VCs simply do not invest if they know that companies are going to be bought out. They would rather invest in other companies in other markets where they know that companies can actually thrive and grow because I know that's where they can make the most profit. They will leave the tech industry if they know they're going to be bought out. At that point, they make this really weird car analogy, but they don't know the business plans of big companies. Like, how are they going to predict what they need?
Okay.
Everyone's ready?
Yeah.
Okay. So, tell me how, again, enforcing, even if we believe that affirming means enforcing antitrust on Monsanto, means that they give up their patents and all these protections in developing countries.
Okay, so now is your argument that the AF can't break down monopolies?
No. The argument here is that your advocacy, or like what happens when the judges vote for you, is that there's less anti-competitive behavior in America. I'm asking, why does that affect their monopoly in India and Africa?
For sure. So the reason that Monsanto can control prices globally is because they have a huge domestic monopoly.
Why? Why are those connected?
Yeah, if you let me finish. Okay, so if you enforce anti-competitive laws or antitrust legislation in America, they have to compete with other firms domestically, which empirically means that they can't be as focused.
I understand that aspect of the argument. That's not what I'm asking about. What I'm asking about is why is their monopoly of India connected to their monopoly of America.
Okay,
Because
sure.
Like, because they make most
Yeah.
of their money
Yeah.
foreign.
Yeah, okay.
Globally.
The argument that we are making is that Monsanto is a domestic distributor. It distributes seeds to international markets, and they set the pricing of those seeds domestically. So our argument is if you increase the
That-
No, that's
competition,
not true. That's
They
not
do
true.
not set prices.
That's
do
not
they?
true.
That's
That's-
they do. That's exactly
No,
what they
prices
do.
are different in different regions of the world based on what consumers can pay.
It
Yeah,
is-
but guess what? Guess where they benchmark the prices in the United
That
States.
doesn't make any sense.
No,
Benchmark
you're missing
doesn't
our
matter.
argument.
No.
Yeah,
no.
like obviously,
okay,
obviously
you're
the
mi-
prices of the seed like
You're
changes.
getting away from our argument. What our argument is that when new companies can compete with Monsanto and they can sell the seeds internationally, that means that
Who
they
says they
can
can sell
compete.
the
No,
seeds internationally?
that's the step we're having
That's our
an issue
argument.
with. That's
No,
the step we're having an issue
yes, Monsanto is a GMO company and they distribute
with.
these.
Okay, sorry. Go. GMO company, not biotech company. Go.
Genetically
Although
modified
that's-
organisms is
Whatever.
biotechnology.
Go.
Okay,
Come on, Danny.
so the argument is that when companies can compete with Monsanto, they can distribute seeds internationally to the same markets, and
No,
at
they
that
can't.
point they
That's
compete with the prices
Isaac,
of
that's different,
Monsanto.
though. That's different.
How?
Because they're competing with different companies in different countries in the
No,
world.
that's our argument is that
Also, just to be clear, like none of
The-
these responses were in his speech ever. Like,
our argument,
that
our
we're talking about right
argument-
now.
that's
our
what's happening.
argument, our argument is
You
that
made one response to that.
if there are
Not like a
new,
call.
Seems like you're trying to avoid the
if there are
conversation.
new
He's
distributors
answering it right now.
within the United States that spread to other markets, just like Monsanto is,
So, Isaac.
that allows for a
Just
competition.
let me take one
in
question
seed
really quick
prices.
and we can talk about this again. All right. So let's talk about your arguments on VC, right? So the Economist evidence that goes conceded explains
It does
that
not go conceded.
you just literally repeated yourself by saying VCs don't like or want to get bought
Well,
out.
I'm actually giving the analysis of what,
Just
from the
really quickly,
perspective
really
of venture
quick.
capitalists.
Is it more
they look for
profitable?
risk.
Is it more profitable for a startup to be innovative and exist in the long term, for example, like Uber,
It's
or is it
much-
to not
so-
just get bought out?
This is what happens. It's much more likely that they're going to get any return on investment at all when it's specialized. And then after they get that, even if they get less money from that they would if a company becomes a huge Google, then they invest in next companies that are equally less risky. That's gross.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, I got
Gonna start. It's gonna follow the order of Isaac's summary. Everyone's ready? At the top, they say, Shri just said it's about the same profits, not the same market share. But market share is what determines profits. It's why they get tons of revenue from advertising. And that's going to be really important. Because again, even if you break up Monsanto or these Facebook companies, they're not small distributors are never going to be able to compete with them at the same level, definitely not internationally. At this point, they completely lose the argument based on the response that they read. But that means, let's go to their argument about Monsanto, which they collapsed to in the second summary. Here's the big problem here. A, it's definitely incorrect. They just keep saying it's a biotechnology firm, but the service they are providing is primarily seeds. They are giving people food and things like that. That is not a technology. If that were to be a technology, then we could define literally everything in this country as a technology firm. But more importantly, they missed the response I read in rebuttal, and they never respond to from Henry, who tells you that in the status quo, the Justice Department has already looked at what Monsanto is doing, and they have let them go through with stipulations in this bill. This means that we're already enforcing antitrust regulation on Monsanto. That's why it is not a topic, it is not part of this topic. But more importantly, even if you buy that there's a probability that Monsanto gets broken down, there's a much higher probability that things like big tech gets broken down by affirming the resolution, because that's what all the proposals are about. So the most probable thing that happens is we break down big tech firms like Facebook and Google. But lastly, they're trying to go for this international impact, but not once we're out the round have they explained how our monopoly in the United States controls the monopolies in India. It's just patently false. They can always monopolize India, and how our domestic U.S. company supposed to compete in entirely new markets with billions of people, never explained in the round. Let's go back to our case. They make two responses. First, they say that they retool the existing products and they don't actually benefit innovation. No, we say this is not true in technology. Google has an incentive to take their innovation and bring it to the market. Then they say that VCs don't want to invest. As we've explained throughout the entire round, it is more risky when everyone wants to be the next Facebook. It is less risky when they're specialized startups. So Fund mergers increase VC by 19%, and this is why we are the world leader in tech innovation, 47% increase in startups, and this is the driving factor in living standards for all Americans, which outweighs their case on probability and scope.
Is everyone ready? It's going to follow Sandy's final focus. On the argument about what happens when you affirm, we are telling you when you affirm, these large corporations get split up into other large corporations. They're still bigger than startups, which is still why they make massive sums of revenue. But the very fact that they're split up into these medium-sized corporations means they can compete with each other, and then that's what ultimately allows competition. Market share is not the same thing as revenue. They obviously don't understand what that is. But then let's go into our argument about Monsanto. The first response is that it's not topical. But the problem with this is that it is. Isaac gives you an example. If Facebook wouldn't be considered a tech giant because they don't sell technology, they do things in like the ad services. But even more so, Monsanto is literally a biotech firm. They use and develop biotechnology and then sell a product to consumers. The reason that they also fall under the umbrella of a tech giant is because they control 98% of the market share. That is the response to Dewey. Isaac, he tells you that right now they're already being litigated, which means that they're not a tech giant. They're not being litigated if they control 98% of the market share. That is ultimately a reason as to why if you affirm, you help those 44 million people who can't have access to those seeds get food. This outweighs for two reasons. One, on probability, because you know when you affirm the resolution, Monsanto gets broken up, prices are competing. They say that it can't be happening on an international level, but what ultimately means is if Monsanto gets broken up into four smaller firms, for example, they make it so that you can't compete and you can't allow Monsanto to distribute seeds to foreign nations at the same time because of distribution capabilities, and also competition empirically reduces prices. That's our Busso evidence from case. Now on their side of the flow, even if you don't want to vote off Monsanto, we still have won the round on their side of the flow because of our argument that Isaac tells you that these large firms simply buy out smaller firms and only innovate when they deem profitable. Empirically, General Motors bought out the electric car, waited 10 years, and then put it out when it was profitable. This is an empirical example of the real world that they have not refuted. That's why empirically, in our analysis for Busso, over 400 firms over 5 years, he finds that innovation has decreased by 20% and 16% over the entire firm. At the end of the day, his conclusion is simple. Any benefits of mergers are clearly and substantially outweighed by the possible benefits. Because you help people in poverty and also increase innovation, vote F.